Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unraveling what is, without a doubt, one of the most awe-inspiring true stories of human endurance you are ever going to hear. We're looking at a survival epic that pushes the absolute boundaries of what the human body, and honestly, the human spirit, can withstand. This isn't just some dusty historical story about an expedition. It's literally a masterclass in leadership, resilience, and just the sheer stubborn will to survive against the most brutal conditions on our planet.
So, I want you to picture this. It's May 20th, 1916. You're at a whaling station on the insanely remote South Georgia island. Suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, three completely unrecognizable men just stumble into the settlement. I mean, their clothes are in total shreds, their beards are wild, and their faces are literally blackened by frostbite, sun, and burning blubber smoke. The whaling station manager is absolutely stunned and asks who they are. And the reason he's so shocked, because according to the rest of the world, these men had been dead for exactly 532 days.
Part 1. The Doomed Expedition. To really understand how they ended up there, let's flash back to August 1914, when these men first set out to conquer the most dangerous, desolate continent on Earth, Antarctica. Sir Ernest Shackleton, an Anglo-Irish explorer, had this absolute obsession with the ice. He'd actually tried to reach the South Pole before, but this time, he wanted to achieve a massive first for humanity. He wanted to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot. Now, the sheer audacity of how he recruited his team is just staggering. Shackleton purportedly placed an ad in a newspaper, essentially promising biting cold, endless blizzards, months of complete darkness, and absolutely no guarantee of a safe return. Can you imagine seeing that in a job description today? Yet somehow, 5,000 men applied. From that massive pool, Shackleton handpicked a highly specialized crew of 27 men, sailors, doctors, scientists, carpenters, who fully, knowingly accepted the life and death stakes of this whole expedition. They set sail on a ship beautifully named the Endurance, heading straight into the world's most unforgiving environment. To put things into perspective, winter temperatures in Antarctica routinely plummet below -50 degrees Celsius. Add in blinding snowstorms, constantly shifting sea ice, and you've got a landscape that actively fights human existence. And get this, along with the crew, they brought 69 sled dogs and even a ship's cat, relying entirely on maps and sextants in an era way before GPS was a thing. Well, as you might guess, the mission rapidly devolved from a daring exploration into a catastrophic, ticking clock nightmare. After leaving England in August 1914, they hit the Weddell Sea. But by December, the ice just began to close in. The sea literally froze solid around them, trapping the Endurance. By February 1915, they realized, okay, we're stuck here for the dark Antarctic winter. And then came the ultimate disaster. The immense, crushing pressure of the shifting ice essentially tore the ship apart. In November 1915, the Endurance sank straight into the abyss. Part 2. Surviving on the ice. Suddenly, 28 men found themselves stranded on a desolate, floating ice sheet. They had absolutely no ship, zero outside communication, and the darkest, most terrifying winter imaginable settling in right around them. Just standing there on the frozen sea, watching their ship vanish beneath the ice, they were instantly, completely cut off from the rest of the world. With their resources rapidly dwindling, nature really unleashed its worst. They set up what they ironically called Patience Camp, right there on the floating ice. The daily rations were incredibly grim. A single biscuit, a little cocoa, and whatever seal or penguin meat they managed to hunt. But guys, it got so much worse. Dehydration set in so severely that their throats became literally too dry to swallow solid food. To survive, they were forced to eat raw seal meat just to extract the blood for hydration. And then, in a totally soul-crushing decision, just to conserve food and stay alive, they eventually had to kill and eat the very sled dogs they had brought with them. And as if starvation wasn't enough of a hurdle, the shifting winds were literally acting like a giant treadmill, pushing their floating ice camp backward, completely away from their intended destinations. But this is exactly where Shackleton's leadership truly shone. He constantly adapted. He instantly changed their objectives to keep his exhausted crew focused and, most importantly, alive. First, they targeted Clarence Island. When the ocean currents pushed them off course, he pivoted right to King George Island. Finally, as the ice beneath their boots began to dangerously thin and crack, they made a desperate do-or-die dash for their final hope, Elephant Island.
Part 3. Escape to Elephant Island. To have any chance at reaching safety, the crew piled into 3 small lifeboats they'd managed to salvage from the sinking Endurance. For 7 agonizing days and nights, they rode through freezing, violent, stormy waters, battling profound exhaustion, severe frostbite, and just sheer terror, all just to reach a barren rock in the ocean.
Now, stepping onto solid land in April 1916 was obviously a massive psychological victory. I mean, it was the first time they had actually felt Earth beneath their boots in a year and a half. But the horrifying reality quickly set in. Elephant Island was completely deserted. It was utterly barren, violently cold, and a staggering 1,300 kilometers away from the whaling stations of South Georgia, which, let's be honest, was their only realistic hope for rescue.
Knowing full well that his men would soon die of starvation and exposure if they just sat there and waited, Shackleton made an almost unthinkable choice. He and 5 carefully chosen men took their most seaworthy lifeboat, which, by the way, was a tiny 22-foot open boat, and launched it into the Scotia Sea towards South Georgia. They were navigating the Drake Passage region, which is infamous for being the most violent stretch of water on the entire planet. For 16 terrifying days, they battled monstrous 12-meter-high waves. Think about that. That's like a 4-story building of freezing water crashing down on you, while you're constantly bailing water and chipping ice off the boat just to keep it from capsizing.
Miraculously, and I do mean miraculously, they sighted South Georgia Island. But nature wasn't quite done messing with them yet. Hurricane-force winds forced them to land on the wrong side of the island, the completely uninhabited side. So Shackleton and 2 of his strongest men, Frank Worsley and Tom Crean, had to leave the other 3 behind with the boat and begin a 40-kilometer, 36-hour continuous trek. They had to somehow climb across uncharted vertical ice, treacherous glaciers, and freezing mountain peaks entirely without sleep and without any proper climbing gear.
And this brings us right back full circle. Remember that stunned manager at the whaling station we talked about at the beginning? Well, after hearing the faint whistle of the whaling station, which was literally the first human sound they'd heard in nearly 2 years, they finally staggered into the camp. When the completely stunned manager asked who these wild, unrecognizable men were, the response was incredibly simple, but it carried the weight of an absolute miracle. My name is Shackleton. The men the entire world thought had vanished into the ice forever were alive.
Part 4. The Ultimate Rescue. Because the story absolutely does not end there. Even though he was physically destroyed from the journey, Shackleton absolutely refused to rest. His heart, his mind, was still out there on the ice. He immediately turned his absolute focus back to the 22 men who were still marooned, starving, and huddled under overturned lifeboats back on Elephant Island.
The sheer persistence required for this rescue operation was staggering. It actually took Shackleton 4 desperate attempts over 4 agonizing months. Again and again, he procured rescue ships only to be beaten back by impenetrable walls of sea ice. Finally, in August 1916, a Chilean steam tug called the Yelcho managed to break through the freezing mist. Back on the island, the men had honestly nearly given up all hope until they suddenly spotted the mast of the ship breaking the horizon.
And here is the true, undeniable miracle of our story today. Shackleton had led his men into the single most hostile environment on Earth. They endured nearly 2 years of freezing isolation, starvation, the complete loss of their ship, and literally impossible ocean crossings. Yet, when the Yelcho finally pulled up to Elephant Island, Shackleton counted the figures standing on the beach. Every single one of his 27 crew members who embarked on that journey returned home safely. Not a single human life was lost.
So, wrapping up this explainer, we really have to ask ourselves, how can we channel Shackleton's unbreakable resilience and profoundly adaptable leadership into the insurmountable challenges we face in our own lives? Shackleton proved that when a leader flat out refuses to give up and when a team relies on absolute trust and adaptability, even the most impossible odds can be beaten. So think about it. How can you apply that exact same unwavering determination to your own journey, no matter how thick the ice gets?